Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Reesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Adelia Schleusz, founder and creative director of What If Lab. Please enjoy Adelia Schleusz. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Adelia Schleusz, founder and creative director of What If Lab. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this so much. It's great to be here.
I'm excited to dig into this topic of creativity. I know it's a passion of yours and the things that you do, but before we get there, why don't you share a little bit more about who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, no, great. My sort of career journey and life journey is a little bit of an unconventional one. I grew up in many places. My family is from South America, and so we have those kind of deep cultural roots. Um, and so over the years, I've sort of curated my own career, and I started with neuropsychology and behavioral sciences and research, but I have sort of a creative to the core, and so I've been a vocalist and done music and moved into then commercial interior design, and so really trying to um, use my impact and use what I know and my knowledge to help create environments and places and experiences that better impact people and planet. So that's sort of it in short. And What If Lab is really sort of the outcome of all these different experiences and seeing that there was this really big opportunity to think about things differently and very early on with sort of this really long-term kind of future foresight, bringing in multidisciplinary teams and different expertise that are sort of unexpected to a conversation to create these big ideas that are tangible and kind of providing some strategy around that. So it's been kind of exciting and finding this sort of new niche in the industry and being a little bit of a disruptor.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. Can you speak to the, people that you've brought together that we may not think, oh, yes, that goes with this, or that, like, how did you cultivate that?
Yeah, well, and it's one of those things where, in our industries, in our respective industries, if you will, there's sort of these vertical kind of teams, and you're expected, you're going to bring. So, for example, if you're designing a space, there's going to be your mechanical designer, architect, your interior designer, and different expertise. And so, what I found was, why not bring a material scientist into some of this information? Or if we are talking about the landscape and the surroundings, we should be thinking of maybe there's an agricultural component or building natural materials from the land, or how do we think about things differently and bring these different experts to sort of debunk some of the assumptions or maybe status quo that we've done in the past to think about things differently. So, like for example, there's a recent conversation. We're talking to a forensic scientist, and then we are thinking about biotechnology differently. And so we need maybe a biochemist to come into the conversation. And how are we doing these things in spaces and where people experience spaces differently? So it's just an opportunity to really kind of challenge the current thinking and like who's at the table, what are the voices that are not here that could really take this in a new direction.
I love that. That offers not only so many opportunities for creativity, but just the collaboration that gets to show up in that and hearing what someone else would see as being the priority or important to generate a new experience for people who've never thought in that way before. I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's exciting to just hear people's, conversation around a big idea that we're all trying to tackle and figure out.
Mhm.
And, it takes multiple perspectives from diverse backgrounds to really come up with innovative solutions.
Sure, sure. Well, when you kind of look at your own creativity or creativity that you experience, what does it mean to you to be creative?
Yeah, so this one is maybe like in two parts. So there is simply being human. I really think that, if you think about it, the path for creativity starts there.
Hmm.
For decades upon decades, we've created and transmitted complex techniques and information over generations. And so it's almost like we're kind of have this ability to be creative. We have our minds, we have our faculty ability to think, imagine, and learn from our experiences. So in a sense, we have the ability to be creative, but then there's
Hmm.
this also interesting paradox, if you will. So if you think about when we're little, we have these big imaginations. We can do anything. We can fly.
Hmm.
We can, and then as you acquire more knowledge and learn more, the more we know is beautiful. But at the same time, we start to make assumptions. We draw conclusions, perhaps sometimes too quickly. And we
Hmm.
start to so there's this innate creativity I think we have. And then there's also this, we have to kind of keep fueling that engine, right?
Hmm.
That exercise that part of the brain that is thinking and stretching our thinking
Hmm.
um, beyond what we know. And yeah, so I think to be creative, there's sort of like it takes effort, but then there's also we have the ability to do so. Yeah, so that's exciting.
Mm, that is it. And I love you the like fueling the creative train or that
Mm.
engine. How do you in your own life fuel your own creative engine?
Yeah, so so this one, okay. I always say I'm like I find inspiration from most things, and
Yeah.
it could be the simplest things. But I think what really inspires me is first being a really good listener and observer.
Mm,
So I tend to get excited about learning new things, but first you have to kind of have that quiet, that listening, observing, and then always finding creativity through or inspiration through me personally. I go outside. I go
mm,
outside into nature. I take in the air. I think from a multi-sensory standpoint, I very much want to experience all the stimuli, if you
hmm.
will, in ways that are unexpected. For example, my daughter and I, we found this really, really interesting looking leaf. I should have taken a picture of it, but so we dissected it, took it apart. We're like, where did it come from? What tree? What are the root systems? How do the root systems talk to one another? And how do these natural systems inform how we may think about things in our real life? So I think that's what really, like, I draw inspiration from the smallest of things and then
Mm.
sometimes the biggest of ideas. Um, but yeah, so
I love that. And just the curiosity, kind of that innate curiosity in figuring out how they talk, how the root systems talk to each other, or how they, what tree it came from, this leaf, and that, like, what a gift to be in that curiosity space. Do you find that, or I guess my own curiosity is, how do you cultivate curiosity in the work that you do and in more of the business side of things?
yeah. Well, I think really, so recently it starts with those that sort of have the appetite to, okay, we have this challenge, but we want to think about it differently.
Mm.
I think that is where, I thrive. I come in and
Mhm.
really collaborate and co-create with, okay, is it something, technology? Is it a product? Is it an idea? It's maybe, behavior in a workplace, for example.
Mm.
And so, I think it starts with the idea and then the sort of creative challenge is all these things built around it. So then what are the
Mm.
things that we maybe need to think about, or what are the things that are happening and that are super innovative and profound that we don't know are happening right now and are already underway. And so I oftentimes I say this in sort of a playful way, but it's also very real. Is if we know what we're talking about, it's already being done, and it's already it's already well on its way. So what? How can we then think about what people will need in the far future? And so we kind of glean on the speculative sort of thinking, scenario planning,
Mm,
what if it really is that big question? What if we start thinking about what people might need in 10, 20 years, 30 years?
mm-hmm.
What might that look like? So really, I often run these imagine workshops. So
Mm,
what that is we take this really big theme and it's specific to around what this client needs or what this company needs or what this design, creative team needs. And then we start to really, pull that apart and stretch our thinking
mm,
well into the future, macro thinking, so we can then kind of zone in and zoom in into things that are, strategy and to solving for
mm.
that. So yeah, we have these Imagine workshops and people get really excited about it, but it is things that are very profound that are happening now and could be happening tomorrow. And then we bring in different expertise to sort of
Yeah.
share some of that insight
Mm,
and really stretch our thinking together.
mm-hmm. How great. As we were talking, I was thinking like you have to have such a profound imagination or be able to tap into that imaginative childlike part of your brain. Is this something that's always been accessible to you, or is this like a muscle that you've really flexed over time to get to where you are today?
So that's I love this question because when I first started this creative consultancy, I really started thinking about, okay, how have I been doing this my entire life? And so kind of, reverse engineering the thinking, like how, where did it start? Where did it begin? Like it is sort of this exercise of creative thinking that I have been doing since I can remember. And
Mm,
so, there's not specific early memories of being creative, but there is actually one profound thing that came up when I started doing some soul searching and thinking of, okay, what is like this manifesto of like creative, that I'm going to start. And it all went back to, do you remember those science fairs in like elementary
hmm.
school, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember, I was doing my own project. I was working on my own project, and we get to this science fair, and while children were showcasing their erupting volcanoes and, the mixing corn flour to make
Hmm.
Play-Doh, I was sitting there with this sort of future machine prototype. I didn't realize it was supposed to like demonstrate that it happened there. I thought it was like, hey, we're coming up with innovations here. These are ideas. And so I had, my cardboard box with duct tape and, painted on buttons and things. And I had a larger object on one side and a smaller object on the other
Mm,
side. And so my idea was, okay, so what happens is you input information into this machine, and the output would be then much smaller scale, so you can study it and analyze it and understand it. And of course, I'm not using these words as an elementary school
yeah,
person, but
sure.
I was thinking back and I was like, yeah, I'm putting information in. This machine will output this really small scale thing to study. And so as the teachers were coming around, I heard them saying like, okay, you have to show how it works. And so I was mortified. So
Oh,
it was a very pivotal moment, I think, in my
yeah.
childhood where I was mortified. I put it in my backpack and I said I didn't complete my work and I'd bring it in tomorrow, and it had something to do with magnets.
Oh,
But I think when I thought back to that,
yeah.
I really was like, huh. So I just have always had my eyes on like, what next? What if we could do
Hmm.
this differently? And that's not to discard historical value.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
equally and critically important. But yeah, I think that was one of the when I was thinking about this question, I'm like, okay, this is where it kind of went, is the
Where it
unexpected.
began.
And
Yeah.
my mind was a little different. It works a little
Yeah, but I
different.
love that. I guess I'd be so curious, what would the teachers have said if you had said, well,
I
you have to
know.
use your
Yeah.
imagination, but here's how it works.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, I
part of
should have. Which is again that sort of innocent, like, oh no, I can't go against the
Yeah,
grain, And then when you get
right.
older, you're like, you know what, being weird is really cool. It's fine.
Yeah, so true. Well, I'm curious, like when you step into an Imagine workshop or a space where you're really asking people to draw on their own creative voices, and you come up against blocks or stagnation or challenges, how do you work with that? How do you elicit, shifts or change when you bump up against blocks?
Yeah, yeah, roadblocks. There's a lot of those. I think, I mean, for many, many years, in industry and outside of industry and the periphery, um, I'm good at those situations. Like it's
Hmm.
okay because I
Yeah.
don't, you never want to, you want people to get uncomfortable, right?
Mm.
So there is this need to get a little uncomfortable because otherwise we'll just be doing more of the same. And so I think earlier when I talked about, you kind of have to have the appetite first.
Yeah.
Um, now I'm really looking for those teams and people that have the appetite to really kind of push
Mm.
the boundaries there. But again, anyone can do it, right? So I
Hmm.
think imagination, I go back to this, and there's a lot of science-based
Hmm.
information that we use in this, but the term imagination I keep bringing back because I think it's okay to sort of have this sense of wonder. And
Mm.
you do oftentimes run into sort of um, the fixed mental set or
Sure.
unnecessary constraints and barriers. And so there's a lot of ways to help through that, like brainstorming activities,
Mm.
mapping exercises. There's various processes that you can kind of glean on. There's, we all are probably familiar with, design thinking. There's future
Mm.
foresight to inform these possible future creative solutions.
Hmm.
And for me, it kind of all goes back to like that imagination is our superpower. Once we can stretch our
Mm.
thinking, we can then really start to tap into things that we probably were not expecting to assume. So creative fields in particular, we're faced with really complex challenges. So we do need to have this creative agility. It's also it's sort of fundamental now. We don't
Yeah.
have everything is really moving and evolving very fast, and so it is important to kind of shift that into a future oriented kind of systems integrated thinking
Hmm.
with, of course, I always say human and planet centric practices, right? We
Sure.
want to make
Yeah.
sure that we're the ethicists now,
Hmm.
and so we have to have that accountability and that responsibility,
Yeah.
what people will need. Yeah.
Sure. You said a phrase and I wrote it down, creative agility. And that sparked something in me. And for people who might be listening and wonder, creative agility, what is that? And how do I get there? What would be some ways that you would encourage others to kind of flex their own creative agility or practice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the things that I mentioned, those different activities to do
Hmm.
that. Um, that's really the best way to stretch your thinking. So let's say, there's a certain project you're trying to tackle, or maybe a piece of artwork or something you're trying to think
Hmm.
of differently. Maybe putting that to the side and then looking into things that are on the periphery of that idea that may be kind of unrelated, and starting to think of how those things might be interconnected or how they may influence one another, or what's the
Mm.
cause and effect. And so again, I think it goes back to that you're kind of flexing your neurons. I mean, you're like
Hmm.
connecting these new ideas, and it is a muscle. You do
Yeah.
have to flex that. So that agility, what I'm talking about is the ability to kind of think outside the problem in front of you.
Mm.
And so that practicing doing that helps you be able to do that more frequently. And there's, we could dig into the science of what happens with your brain when you're thinking of other things, and that cognition that happens. That's
Yeah.
so beautiful. And I think a big part of that too is when we think about mental wellness and well-being, and as we age and evolve,
Mm-hmm.
um, being able to do that helps us maintain our mind resilience longer, and so
Mm-hmm.
we can continue to thrive as people as we age and we get older. And I think that's also very important. It's just healthy for our mind.
Hmm. Absolutely. And to keep the what you were talking about, the sustainability in terms of like planet and ethical sustainability when it sounds like designing product or a space that can support that.
Mm-hmm.
How does, you know, how would you bring some of those into this idea of being creative? Maybe not for a specific product or project, but just in your human self, the sustainable creative expression or that piece.
Yeah, well, I think the way that I'm kind of understanding the question is, so both there's this internal like sustainability, right? So we think
Yeah.
about longevity lifestyle, we're thinking
Yeah.
about um, how do we then have circularity and who we are and that. And then there's also the external component, which I think I could even take the word sustainability and thrust it. I've been talking about this for years now, is regenerative design,
Mm,
regenerative thinking, because
hmm
so you could apply that both internally and externally.
hmm
So it's no longer just sustaining and being resilient, but it's now how do we think of spaces and places and people in a more regenerative way? How
Mm,
do we rejuvenate, again? So it's sort of going back to that circularity, both in sustainability for the environment and sustainability in yourself. I think that's a really big piece to a lot of this designing. So
hmm
designing is innately future when you're
Yeah.
designing something. So we have to be accountable with what we are designing. So I think all those things kind of play a big role in that. And then you're sort of like this curator or conduit that's helping bring the
Mm,
right people together for the right reasons and making that good impact that we're all trying to achieve.
I love that the rejuvenation, but n not only externally, but that internal rejuvenative space and how you're doing that inner work simultaneously with the outer external piece. What is that
Yeah.
process for you? How are you tapping into that internal rejuvenation so that you can produce or show up in that more external regenerative space?
Yeah. Yeah. I think so in my mind, right? So I have like there's this like hyper high energy of feeling that creativity and
Mm,
inspiration and, pooling more knowledge and trying to understand. And then there's also, I think, this tension of allowing ourselves to let our minds go quiet.
mm,
And when we think about little kiddos when they're like overstimulated and there's so much going on in their world and there's technology and there's all of these things that are feeling them that are at higher intensities.
mhm.
It is equally critical to let them just be bored,
Mhm.
let the mind go quiet and
Yeah.
just enjoy the negative space. And that's when you kind of I don't know, then oftentimes it's after that when you have these really brilliant ideas because you've had
Mm,
the kind of flush of ideas and so
mhm,
there's these interesting tension points. And so when you asked me for me personally, I very much practice both of those intentionally.
mhm.
So I have my moments of just hyper like, this is great, I could talk about this for days. And then there are moments where I'll get my latte, I'll sit down, I'll go sit outside, I'll just
Mm,
uh, focus on breathing and just really trying to quiet your mind so that way you have the fuel later because you can't stay at that high energy, that's not
yeah.
sustainable.
Right.
So it is equally important to do that for yourself. And oftentimes people don't because they're like, we don't have time to do that. And I'm like, well, you don't not have time. Like you have, that is something that, all the double negatives. So like you
Yeah.
have to do this. It's important work
Yeah.
so you can then contribute
Mm.
later. So
Yeah. That contributing later piece, I think, gets lost sometimes because it's so right now, the now versus what I'm doing now. How does that future self how will it impact the future self or the future environment that I'm in? And so I really appreciate bringing those pieces together and
yeah.
allowing that, the rest, digest, integration piece. Because if we only live in that one space, that it's hard to keep it up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that goes back to, that turning point for me was,
Mm.
okay, I've been, in industry, I've been on periphery of industry, I've been doing these things, and I have a lot of energy to give, but I'm
Yeah.
also don't have how many years. So,
Yeah.
so then, it's almost like I want to put that energy in a direction that there is less roadblocks, right? So that way
Mhm.
we can do the things that we're trying to do. And so
Mhm.
I want to bring along others, along with me to do that. And so far it's been pretty incredible and exciting.
Well,
Get to, yeah, meeting all those new people that are ready to go.
yeah, it sounds amazing. And what an incredible space to hold and build within. And I look forward to hearing more about what is going on and how it's impacting and the things that you're doing there. I have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Ooh, joy.
Mm.
Pure joy. Yes, I think joy. And that maybe that's why I find inspiration in those things because
Yeah,
yeah, I think you made a good point. I think it's because like I love that it makes me happy
yeah.
to be able to think and do and learn and
Oh.
just be creative. And
Mhm.
I think, the beginnings of my career was started in, more science based, but during that time, I had always was a vocalist. I wrote music, I
Mm.
painted, I drew sculptures, Um, so I think that I, I don't know any other way. So I think that's probably why I drew more into that creative
Mm.
space of designing experiences and
Mhm.
um, having the ability to be creative because it just brings me joy and that's kind of who I am. It's part of me.
I love that. Well, that I fully support bringing more joy into your life with that. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. If people want to learn more about the
Absolutely.
What If Lab and the things you have out in the world, how could they go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's always a good place to just, DM me. That I've found such incredible global partnerships and that platform. And then also, of course, my website, whatiflab.com. There's some information there and also a way to reach out to me directly. You just fill out your email and yeah, I would love to hear ideas and what, others are working on that
Mm.
um, are trying to tackle something really, really interesting for the right reasons. And yeah, I think that's a good start.
Perfect. Well, I'll put those links in show notes so people have very easy access. And thank you again so much for joining me. I thoroughly have enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's a great theme and topic, and yes, I appreciate you giving me the time in this space to have the conversation.
You are so welcome. Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.